Jake Miller wiped the sweat from his face as he walked through the dusty ruins. The sun was hot on New Dakota, and his armor felt heavy after 3 hours of patrol. Behind him, 5 other Marines followed in a line. They all carried their weapons, ready, eyes watching for danger. "Keep your eyes open," Jake whispered into his radio. "Intel says the crystalbacks might be in this area." The Marines called the Zenthari crystalbacks because of their hard, shiny skin that looked like broken glass. The aliens had 4 arms and stood 8 feet tall. They were fast, strong, and very angry about humans taking their land. Jake had been fighting them for 2 years now. He had seen too many good people die in this war, but orders were orders, and his job was to keep his team alive while they checked the old settlements for enemy activity. The town they walked through used to be home to human farmers. Now it was just broken buildings and empty streets. The Zenthari had bombed it 6 months ago. Glass and metal covered the ground, some walls still stood, but most had fallen down. "Sarge," called out Private Ben Clark from behind. "This place gives me the creeps." "Stay focused, Clark," Jake replied. He understood the feeling. Dead places always felt wrong, but they had to search every building to make sure no enemies were hiding there. Jake stopped at the corner of what used to be a school. He held up his hand and his team stopped too. Something had moved in the building across the street. He watched carefully, but saw nothing more. "Rodriguez," he whispered to his second-in-command. "Take Clark and Lee around the back. Martinez and Stone, you're with me. We go in the front." Danny Rodriguez nodded. He was Jake's best friend and had been with him since basic training. If anyone could be trusted to watch his back, it was Danny. Jake counted to 10, then moved toward the broken front door. His boots crunched on glass as he stepped inside. The building was dark and smelled like smoke and death. Old furniture lay scattered everywhere. He moved from room to room, checking corners and shadows. Everything seemed empty. Maybe the movement had just been wind blowing some trash around. Then he heard it. A small sound like someone trying not to cry. Jake froze. He listened hard. There it was again, coming from the back room. He motioned for Martinez and Stone to stay back. Slowly, Jake moved toward the sound. His finger was ready on his weapon's trigger. The Zenthari were known for setting traps. Jake pushed open the door to the back room. Inside he saw broken desks and chairs. Papers covered the floor. And in the corner, behind an overturned table, something small was hiding. It wasn't human. The creature was about the size of a 7-year-old child, but its skin had the same crystal-like quality as adult Zenthari. 4 small arms wrapped around, its body as it shook with fear. Big, dark eyes stared up at Jake with terror. It was a Zenthari child, a little girl by the look of her. Jake's training told him to call for backup. Enemy young could grow up to be enemy soldiers, some of his fellow Marines would say to eliminate all threats. But looking at the scared little creature, Jake couldn't see an enemy. He saw a frightened child who had lost everything. The little alien made a soft sound, like a whimper. She was hurt. Jake could see purple blood on her arm where something had cut her. "It's okay," Jake said softly, even though he knew she couldn't understand English. He lowered his weapon and took a step closer. The child's eyes went wide. She pressed herself further into the corner, but had nowhere else to go. That's when Jake heard the sound that made his blood run cold. The high-pitched whine of Zenthari energy weapons charging up. "Contact," he yelled into his radio. "We've got crystalbacks." The first energy bolt came through the window behind him, burning a hole in the wall next to his head. Jake dove to the side as more shots followed. The room filled with the smell of burning metal and stone. "Rodriguez, report," Jake shouted over the noise of weapons fire. "We're pinned down back here." Danny's voice crackled through the radio. "At least 6 of them." Jake looked around desperately. He was trapped in the room with the alien child. Energy bolts kept coming through the windows. His team was under attack outside. This was turning into a nightmare. The little Zenthari girl was crying now, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. She understood that the shooting meant death was close. Jake saw something that made his heart stop. A human plasma grenade had rolled through the broken window. It sat on the floor just a few feet away. its red light blinking faster and faster. He had maybe 3 seconds before it exploded. Jake didn't think. He didn't calculate. He didn't consider orders or protocols or the fact that the child was supposed to be his enemy. He just moved. Jake threw himself across the room and covered the small alien with his body. His armor was tough, but a plasma grenade at close range would hurt badly, maybe kill him. The world went white and loud. Pain exploded through Jake's chest and back as the grenade went off beneath him. He felt his ribs crack. Something warm and wet ran down his face. His ears rang so loud he couldn't hear anything else. But, under him, the little alien was safe. Jake tried to stay awake, but darkness was pulling at the edges of his vision. He could feel the child moving under him, scared but alive. That was enough. As Jake's eyes closed, he saw tall shadows moving into the room. Zenthari warriors with their weapons drawn. He expected them to finish him off. Instead, he heard one of them make a sound of surprise. Then gentle hands were lifting him away from the child. The last thing Jake saw before losing consciousness was a female Zenthari warrior in decorated armor kneeling beside the little girl. The woman's forearms wrapped around the child in a protective embrace. Then everything went dark. Jake woke up slowly. His head felt like someone had hit it with a hammer. Every breath hurt his chest. When he tried to move, sharp pain shot through his ribs. He was lying on something soft, not a human medical bed. The surface felt strange, like it was alive and warm. The air smelled different too, sweet, but with a metallic edge that made his nose tingle. Jake opened his eyes carefully. The ceiling above him was not made of metal or concrete. It looked like crystal, but it glowed with soft blue light. Strange symbols moved across its surface, like water. Where was he? Jake turned his head and immediately regretted it. Pain shot down his neck. But what he saw made him forget the hurt for a moment. He was in a Zenthari medical facility. The walls were made of the same glowing crystal as the ceiling. Machines that looked like living metal trees stood around his bed. Their branches moved gently, and Jake realized they were monitoring his body somehow. "You are awake." The voice came from beside his bed. Jake turned as slowly as he could and saw a female Zenthari sitting in a chair that seemed to grow from the floor. She was tall, like all Zenthari, but her crystal skin was different. Instead of the rough, broken glass look of the warriors Jake had fought, hers was smooth and polished. Patterns of gold and silver ran through the crystal like veins. Her forearms were graceful, not built just for fighting. Most importantly, she wore armor that Jake recognized. The decorated chest plate and ceremonial markings meant she was high-ranking. Very high-ranking. "I am Veltara Kethmaran," the female said. Her English was good, but she spoke each word carefully. "You know me as your enemy, but today you are my honored guest." Jake tried to speak, but his throat was dry. Veltara reached for a container of water with one of her arms while her other hand pressed something on a nearby machine. The water was cool and tasted faintly of flowers. "Thank you," Jake managed to say. "It is I who must thank you," Veltara replied. "You saved my daughter's life." Jake remembered the little alien girl he had protected. "Is she okay?" "Zira is well, because of your sacrifice. You covered her with your own body when the explosive device threatened her life. This is an act of great honor among my people." Veltara stood and moved closer to Jake's bed. Now he could see her face clearly. Zenthari faces were hard to read for humans, but Jake thought he saw something like sadness in her large, dark eyes. "Your injuries were severe," she continued. 3 broken ribs, internal bleeding, damage to your spine. Our healers have treated you with our best medicines. You will recover fully." Jake looked down at himself. His chest was wrapped in something that looked like living silver mesh. It felt warm against his skin and seemed to pulse gently with his heartbeat. Whatever it was, the pain was already less than when he first woke up. "Why?" Jake asked. "Why are you helping me?" "We're at war." Veltara was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "Among the Zenthari, there is an ancient law called Keth Bond. When someone saves the life of a child by risking their own life, a sacred connection is formed. The Child becomes their spiritual family, and they become part of ours. She paused, watching Jake's face carefully. You could have left Zira to die. You could have saved yourself. Instead, you chose to protect an enemy child with your own body. This tells me that humans are not the mindless destroyers we believe them to be. Jake thought about his fellow Marines. He wondered what they would say about this. Probably that he was crazy for risking his life for an alien. My people won't understand, Jake said. Perhaps not, but understanding can grow, like crystals in deep caves. It takes time, but eventually even the hardest stone can change. Veltara moved to a table and picked up something small. When she came back, Jake saw it was a device that looked like a metal flower. This is a translator, she explained, touching it to her throat. It will help us speak more easily. The device made a soft musical sound, and suddenly Veltara's voice was clearer. Jake could hear emotion in it now, something the machine had hidden before. I must tell you something else, she said. Your act of courage has created a problem for both of us. What kind of problem? By saving Zira, you have created a Keth bond not just with her, but with our entire family line. In the eyes of Zenthari law, I now owe you a life debt that can never be fully repaid. And you, whether you know it or not, have become part of our clan. Jake didn't understand what that meant, but it sounded serious. There's more, Veltara continued. Word of what you did has spread among my warriors. Some are angry that I am treating a human with honor. Others are curious about a species that would sacrifice for our young. Your action has created questions about this war. A door in the crystal wall opened, and Jake saw the little girl he had saved. Zira was smaller than he remembered, barely reaching her mother's waist. Her crystal skin was pale pink, not the darker colors of adult Zenthari. She walked on two legs like humans, but Jake could see that all four of her arms moved with the grace of a dancer. Zira said something in the Zenthari language. Her voice was like the sound of wind chimes. She wants to thank you, Veltara translated. She remembers you protecting her. The little girl approached Jake's bed carefully. In one of her small hands, she held something that glowed softly. She offered it to Jake with shy movements. It was a crystal pendant, no bigger than his thumb. The crystal was clear as water, but lights moved inside it like tiny stars. It is a memory crystal, Veltara explained. Zira has put her gratitude into it. Among our people, it is the most precious gift a child can give. Jake took the pendant carefully. It was warm in his hand, and he could swear he felt emotions coming from it. Peace, safety, and something that might have been love. Thank you, Zira, Jake said softly. The little girl smiled. It was strange seeing a smile on an alien face, but somehow it looked just like any happy child's expression. Veltara spoke to her daughter in their language, and Zira nodded before leaving the room. You must rest more, Veltara told Jake. Tomorrow, we will talk about how to return you to your people. This will not be simple. By our laws, you are now under my protection, but I understand you belong to your own kind. What happens to the war? Jake asked. Veltara's expression became sad again. That remains to be seen. What you did proves that peace might be possible, but peace is harder to build than war is to start. As Jake closed his eyes to rest, he wondered what his commanders would say when he returned. Would they understand what had happened here, or would they see his actions as betrayal? One thing was certain. Everything had changed the moment. He chose to protect an enemy's child. There was no going back now. Jake stood at attention in the military courtroom, but his legs felt weak. 2 weeks had passed since Veltara had returned him to human territory under a flag of truce. 2 weeks since he had walked back into his base carrying an alien crystal, and stories that no one wanted to believe. Colonel Pete Morrison sat behind the judge's table, his face hard as stone. 3 other officers sat beside him. Jake recognized Major Lisa Campbell and Captain Ron Hayes. The 4th officer was someone Jake didn't know, probably from headquarters. Sergeant Miller, Colonel Morrison's voice echoed in the small room. You stand accused of giving aid to the enemy, abandoning your post during combat and compromising military objectives. How do you plead? Not guilty, sir, Jake replied. Morrison's eyes narrowed. Not guilty? Sergeant, you protected an alien child instead of eliminating a potential future threat. You were treated by enemy medics. You accepted gifts from enemy commanders. Explain to this court how that is not treason. Jake had practiced this moment in his head 100 times. But standing here, facing men who had already decided he was guilty, the words felt heavy in his mouth. Sir, I saw a frightened child in danger. I acted to save an innocent life. That's what we're supposed to fight for. What we're supposed to fight for, Morrison snapped, is human survival. Those crystalbacks want to wipe us off this planet. Every one of them we let live today will try to kill us tomorrow. Captain Hayes leaned forward. Sergeant Miller, during your time in enemy custody, did you reveal any classified information? No, sir. They never asked about our operations. But you did observe their medical technology, their base layout, their security procedures? Jake hesitated. He had seen things that military intelligence would want to know, but he had also given his word to Veltara that he would not use his time as her guest to gather intelligence. I was there as a patient, sir. I was unconscious most of the time. Major Campbell made a note on her tablet. Sergeant, we have reports that enemy activity in your patrol sector has decreased significantly since your return. Do you know why? Jake did know. Veltara had sent him back with more than just his personal effects. She had included a data crystal containing intelligence about Zenthari troop movements, information that had helped human forces avoid 3 major ambushes. But explaining that would mean explaining the Keth bond. It would mean trying to make these officers understand concepts that he barely understood himself. I don't know, sir. Morrison stood up and walked around the table. He was a big man with gray hair and scars from 20 years of combat. Jake had always respected him, but now the colonel looked at him like he was something dirty. Let me tell you what I think happened, Miller. I think you got soft. I think you saw one alien child and forgot about all the humans those monsters have killed. I think you compromised this entire operation because you wanted to play hero. With respect, sir, I saved a life. You saved the wrong life, Morrison slammed his hand on the table. That alien child will grow up to be an alien warrior. In 10 years, she might be the one putting plasma bolts through human soldiers. Did you think about that? Jake had thought about it, many times. But every time he remembered Zira's terrified eyes, he knew he had made the right choice. The courtroom door opened and Danny Rodriguez walked in. Jake's best friend was dressed in his formal uniform, ready to testify. Behind Danny came 3 other Marines from Jake's squad. Colonel Morrison, Danny said after saluting. Permission to speak for Sergeant Miller's character? Morrison looked annoyed. This is not a character hearing, Corporal. This is about actions that may have compromised human security. Sir, I think our security might be better because of what Jake did. Explain. Danny moved to stand beside Jake. Sir, 3 days ago we intercepted Zenthari communications. They were arguing about something they called an honor debt. Some of their commanders want to negotiate prisoner exchanges. Others are talking about reducing attacks on civilian targets. Morrison frowned. What does that have to do with Sergeant Miller? They keep mentioning the human who protected the child. Sir, I think Jake's actions are making some of them question whether we're really the monsters they thought we were. Captain Hayes looked interested. Do you have evidence of this? Private Ben Clark stepped forward. Sir, yesterday my patrol encountered a wounded Zenthari warrior. Instead of fighting, he dropped his weapons and pointed to something on his armor. It looked like the same crystal that Jake brought back. Jake's heart jumped. He still wore Zira's memory crystal on a chain around his neck, hidden under his uniform. The warm feeling it gave him was the only thing that had kept him sane during the past 2 weeks. Major Campbell tapped her tablet. Sergeant Miller, during your time with the enemy, did they mention anything about changing their war tactics? Jake thought carefully. General Veltara said that my actions had created questions about the war. She seemed to think that maybe peace was possible. Peace? Morrison laughed bitterly. Miller, we've been fighting these aliens for 3 years. They've killed thousands of our people. You think one act of mercy is going to end all that? Maybe not end it, sir, but maybe start something. The room was quiet for a long moment. Jake could hear the air recycling system humming overhead. Outside, he could hear the sound of vehicles moving through the base. Colonel Morrison sat back. Down. Sergeant Miller, even if your actions had positive results, you still violated direct orders. You still put enemy welfare above human military objectives. Sir, I put human values above military objectives. There's a difference. Morrison's face grew red. Human values? Our values are staying alive, Sergeant. Our values are making sure the human race has a future on this planet. What kind of future will it be if we become the kind of people who let children die when we could save them? The question hung in the air like smoke. Jake could see the officers looking at each other. Uncertain, Major Campbell cleared her throat. Sergeant Miller, we've received some unusual communications since your return. The Zenthari have requested formal talks about prisoner exchange protocols. They've also indicated they might be willing to discuss limited ceasefires in certain sectors. This could be a trap, Captain Hayes said. It could be, Campbell agreed. But it could also be an opportunity. For the first time since this war started, they're talking about something other than total victory. Morrison stood up again. This court will recess for deliberation. Sergeant Miller, you are confined to quarters pending our decision. As the officers filed out, Danny moved closer to Jake. You did the right thing, brother. Tell that to the colonel. Pete Morrison is a good soldier, but he's been fighting so long he's forgotten there's supposed to be something worth fighting for, besides just killing the other guy. Jake looked around the empty courtroom. What do you think they'll decide? I think you've got them confused. And confused officers sometimes make smart decisions instead of just following the book. That evening, Jake sat in his quarters, staring at Zira's memory crystal. The warm feeling it gave him reminded him that somewhere out there, a little alien girl was safe because he had made a choice to protect instead of destroy. He wondered what Veltara was doing. Was she facing her own court-martial for showing mercy to a human soldier? Was she fighting her own people's anger about treating an enemy with honor? Tomorrow he would learn his fate. Tonight, he could only hope that doing the right thing would be enough. 6 months had passed since Jake's court-martial. The military judges had decided on a punishment that pleased no one. Jake kept his rank, but was transferred to diplomatic security. His job now was to guard the human negotiators who were trying to set up prisoner exchanges with the Zenthari. It was boring work, but Jake didn't mind. The talks were slow, but they were happening. Both sides were learning that the other wasn't completely evil. Small steps, but steps forward. Jake was checking the security around the neutral meeting zone when his radio crackled to life. Sergeant Miller, report to command immediately. Priority 1. Jake frowned. Priority 1 meant emergency. Had the peace talks broken down? Was someone under attack? He ran to the command building and found chaos. Officers were rushing around, with tablets and communication devices. Colonel Morrison stood in the center of it all, looking like someone had just told him the world was ending. Miller, Morrison called when he saw Jake. Get in here, we have a situation. Jake followed the colonel into his office. Major Campbell was there, along with Captain Hayes and several other officers Jake didn't recognize. Their faces were all serious. Sir, what's happening? Morrison pointed to a large screen on the wall. It showed a video feed from the neutral zone. A Zenthari ship had landed there. But this wasn't one of their usual military vessels. This ship was larger, more decorated. It looked important. That ship arrived an hour ago, Morrison explained. They sent a message requesting an immediate meeting with you specifically. Not with our negotiating team, with you. Jake felt his stomach drop. With me? Why? That's what we want to know. The message was signed by General Veltara Keth Moran, the same alien who returned you to us 6 months ago. Major Campbell stepped forward. Sergeant Miller, we need you to go to that meeting. But you'll be wearing recording devices. We need to know what they want. What if it's a trap? Captain Hayes asked. Then we'll have bigger problems than one missing sergeant, Morrison replied grimly. An hour later, Jake walked toward the neutral zone with 5 other Marines as an escort. His heart was beating fast. Why would Veltara want to see him? Had something happened to Zira? The neutral zone was a flat area between human and Zenthari territory. Nothing grew there because both sides had bombed it so many times. It was just dirt and rocks under a gray sky. Veltara was waiting for him beside her ship. She wore the same decorated armor Jake remembered, but she looked tired. 2 Zenthari warriors stood behind her, but their weapons were lowered. "Jake Miller," she said as he approached. Her translator device made her voice sound warm, almost happy. "It is good to see you again." "General Veltara," Jake replied. "You look well. As do you. Your wounds have healed completely?" "Yes, thank you. How is Zira?" Veltara's expression became sad. "That is why I am here." She gestured for Jake to walk with her away from both groups of guards. When they were far enough away that no one could hear them, she stopped. "Zira has not been well since you left," Veltara said. "She has nightmares about the bombing. She wakes up screaming for her protector brother." Jake felt a pain in his chest. "I'm sorry. I didn't know. It is not your fault. The trauma of war affects children deeply. But there is something else. Zira carries your memory crystal everywhere. She says it is the only thing that makes her feel safe." Jake touched the chain around his neck where Zira's crystal hung. "I understand that feeling. Jake Miller, I have come here to make a request. That will sound strange to your people. According to Zenthari law, the Keth bond between you and my family is sacred. You saved my daughter's life with your own body. This makes you her spiritual brother and my spiritual son." Veltara paused, watching Jake's face carefully. "I have come to formally claim you as family." Jake stared at her. "Claim me?" Among the Zenthari, adoption across clan lines is common when bonds of honor are formed. You would remain human, but you would also be part of my family. Zira would have her protector brother back. And perhaps it would show both our peoples that peace is possible. General, I don't understand what that would mean. It would mean you could visit us, learn our ways as we learn yours. It would mean you could help translate not just our words but our hearts. And it would mean that Zira could sleep without nightmares knowing her brother is safe. Jake thought about the little alien girl who had given him her most precious possession. He thought about the warmth he felt from her crystal every day. What would my people say? Some would call it treason, others might see it as hope. What do you say? Before Jake could answer, he heard vehicles approaching. Human military trucks were racing toward the neutral zone. Jake could see Colonel Morrison in the lead vehicle, his face angry. "General, I think we're about to have company." Veltara looked at the approaching vehicles and sighed. "Your leaders do not trust easily. Neither do yours, I'm guessing." "No. There are many among my people who think I am foolish for believing humans can change. They point to the bombings, the battles, the deaths. They say I am weak because I grieve for one human who showed mercy." The vehicles stopped and Morrison climbed out with a squad of Marines. He marched over to Jake and Veltara with his weapon ready. "Sergeant Miller, step away from the alien. This meeting is over." "Colonel, she's not threatening me. I don't care what she's doing. Intelligence reports say there are Zenthari battle groups moving toward this sector. This could be a distraction." Veltara spoke calmly. "Colonel Morrison, I have come here under a flag of truce to make a formal request according to my people's laws. Your laws don't apply to human soldiers." "Perhaps not, but honor should apply to all species." Morrison's face grew red. "Don't talk to me about honor. Your people started this war. And your people responded with equal violence. Both sides have blood on their hands, Colonel. The question is whether we will continue killing until no one is left or whether we will find another way." Jake stepped between them. "Colonel, General Veltara wants to adopt me into her family. It's a formal ceremony that would make me a cultural bridge between our peoples." Morrison stared at Jake like he had lost his mind. "Adopt you? Miller, these aliens are our enemies. You can't just join their family." "Maybe I can. Maybe that's exactly what we need." "Absolutely not. You're a human soldier, not some alien's pet project." Belterra's voice became colder. Colonel Morrison, Jake Miller saved my daughter's life. By our laws, he is already part of my family whether you recognize it or not. I am simply offering to make it official. Morrison raised his weapon. And I'm offering to end this conversation. Sergeant Miller, you're coming back with me. Now. Jake looked at Morrison, then at Belterra. Both sides were watching him, waiting for his choice. Whatever, he decided would affect more than just his own life. Colonel, Jake said slowly, what if this could end the war? Wars end when one side wins, Sergeant. Not when soldiers forget which side they're on. Jake thought about Zira having nightmares. He thought about all the human and Zenthari soldiers who had died in the past 6 months. He thought about the crystal around his neck and the warmth it brought him every day. General Belterra, he said, I accept your claim. The ceremony took place 1 month later in the neutral zone. Both human and Zenthari representatives watched from a safe distance as Jake walked toward the center of the empty field. He wore his dress uniform, but without weapons or military insignia. Belterra had explained that the adoption ceremony required him to come as himself, not as a soldier. The warm weight of Zira's crystal against his chest gave him courage. Belterra waited for him beside a structure that had been built just for this moment. It looked like a crystal tree, its branches reaching toward the sky. Zira stood beside her mother wearing a small version of Zenthari ceremonial robes. Jake had spent weeks learning what this ceremony meant. The Keth bond was more than adoption. It was a spiritual connection that Zenthari believed lasted beyond death. By accepting Belterra's claim, Jake was becoming part of something that his people barely understood. But he understood it. Every night Zira's crystal had shown him dreams of peace, images of humans and Zenthari working together, learning from each other. Maybe it was just wishful thinking, but Jake chose to believe it was possible. Jake Miller, Belterra said as he approached. Are you ready to accept the bonds of family? I am. Do you swear to protect Zira as you would protect your own blood? I do. Do you swear to honor our family name as we will honor yours? I do. Belterra reached into her robes and pulled out a crystal similar to the one Zira had given him, but larger and more complex. Lights moved through it like tiny galaxies. This is a family crystal. It contains the memories and honors of our clan stretching back 1,000 years. By accepting it, you become part of our history, and we become part of yours. Jake took the crystal carefully. It was warm in his hands, and he could feel emotions flowing from it. Joy, sorrow, love, loss. The complete story of a family that was now his family too. Zira stepped forward and spoke in the Zenthari language. Her voice was stronger than Jake remembered, more confident. She says, Belterra translated, that she is happy to have her protector brother back. She says the nightmares have stopped because she knew you would come. Jake knelt down so he was at Zira's eye level. The little alien girl had grown in the months since he had seen her. Her crystal skin was brighter, her movements more graceful. I'm sorry I was away so long, Jake said. Zira hugged him with all 4 arms. Jake was surprised by how natural it felt. Family was family, no matter what species. The ceremony is complete, Belterra announced. Jake Miller is now Jake Miller Keth Miran, son of my house and brother to my daughter. From the human side of the neutral zone came the sound of vehicles starting. Jake could see Colonel Morrison driving away with half his escort. The colonel had made his feelings about the ceremony very clear, but other humans stayed to watch. Major Campbell was there, along with Danny Rodriguez and several other Marines from Jake's old unit. They didn't understand what was happening, but they respected Jake enough to witness it. What happens now? Jake asked Belterra. Now we see if our 2 peoples can learn to trust each other. You will be our first human family member. I suspect you will not be the last. Over the following months, Jake divided his time between human and Zenthari territory. He learned their language, their customs, their way of thinking. In return, he taught them about human culture and values. It wasn't easy. Many humans saw him as a traitor. Many Zenthari saw him as a spy. But gradually, understanding began to grow. Jake discovered that the war had started because of a misunderstanding. Human colonists had built settlements on land that the Xanthari considered sacred. Neither side had tried to communicate. They had just started shooting. With Jake translating, real negotiations became possible. Not just about prisoner exchanges, but about sharing the planet. The breakthrough came when Zira, now 8 years old by human standards, suggested that humans and Xanthari children could go to school together. What seemed impossible to adults seemed perfectly natural to her. The first mixed school was built in the neutral zone. Human and Xanthari children learned side by side. Some parents on both sides were horrified, but the children got along fine. They played games that neither species had invented alone. They created art that combined human creativity with Xanthari precision. Jake found himself appointed as the first human ambassador to the Xanthari Confederation. It was a job he had never trained for, but one that felt right. Every day brought him new challenges as both species learned to see each other as people instead of enemies. The war didn't end with a peace treaty. It ended with a birthday party. Zira's 9th birthday was celebrated by both humans and Xanthari. Human children brought cake and balloons. Xanthari children brought crystal sculptures and memory stones. Jake gave her a new crystal pendant, this one containing his own memories of their growing friendship. As Jake watched human and alien children playing together, laughing at jokes that crossed species lines, he knew that the future was safe. Not because anyone had won the war, but because everyone had chosen to stop fighting it. Colonel Morrison never spoke to Jake again. But years later, when the colonel's own grandson started attending the mixed schools, Jake saw him at a graduation ceremony. Morrison nodded to him once, briefly. It was enough. Danny Rodriguez became the first human to marry a Xanthari. Their wedding was strange and beautiful, combining traditions from both worlds. Jake served as best man and translator. Beltara was promoted to Supreme Commander of Xanthari forces. But by then there was little fighting left to command. Instead, she helped plan joint exploration missions to other worlds. Humans and Xanthari working together were stronger than either species alone. Zira grew up to become a diplomat like her brother Jake. She spoke both languages perfectly and understood both cultures completely. When other alien species made contact with their shared world, it was Zira who led the first meetings. She never forgot the human soldier who had covered her with his own body to protect her from an explosion. That moment of courage had changed the course of two civilizations. On quiet evenings, Jake would sit with his adopted family and feel the warmth from both crystals he wore. Zira's original gift still reminded him that protecting innocence was always the right choice. The family crystal showed him that love could grow between any species that chose to see each other as people instead of enemies. The war that had once seemed endless was now just a sad chapter in history books. Children of both species learned about it in school, but they learned about it together, promising each other that such misunderstanding would never happen again. Jake Miller Keth Moran had saved one alien child with his own body. In return, she had saved his soul and the future of two worlds. Sometimes the smallest acts of courage create the biggest changes. Sometimes protecting one life protects all life, and sometimes the enemy's child becomes the key to peace.